Thank you, and I call Jim Allister.
Speaker, I have known David Trimble for most of my adult life because when I enrolled as a student in the law faculty at Queen's University, David was one of my lecturers, and you didn't have to sit very long in a David Trimble lecture or tutorial to recognise that you were in the presence of a supreme academic and someone who was of intellectual giant proportions. David manfully did his best to teach me two of the driest subjects in the legal curriculum, land law and equity. His lack of success in attaining enthusiasm on my part for those subjects was not a failure on his part, but on mine. But there was a fellow student in respect of whom David subsequently engendered great enthusiasm in a different sphere and in a far more lasting sphere. And of course, my fellow student, Miss Daphne Orr, went on to become Mrs. Daphne Trimble. And what a rock Daphne has been for David through those years. It's clear to all that during his most turbulent political years, Daphne was indeed that rock. And of course, in more recent times of failing health, she was a tower of strength to him. And so our thoughts today, first and foremost, are with Lady Daphne and their 4 children and wider family. Doesn't matter how big a name one might have, how huge a household name someone might be. It is within the bosom of their family that they are loved and missed the most. And so it will be within the Trimble household. Of course, David Trimble's name is synonymous with the Belfast Agreement. And there I come to the territory where I disagreed with David Trimble. To me and to some other unionists, the Belfast Agreement was built upon a mass injustice of the release of hundreds of terrorists of all shades onto our streets as a precursor to terrorists in the government. All part of a structure which has proved to be failing and dysfunctional ever since. And one of the reasons why it is failing and dysfunctional is that though to David, perhaps, and certainly to those unions who voted for it, the Belfast Agreement was meant to be a settlement, to Republicans and to nationalists, it was only ever a process in which the insatiable had to be fed ever constant concessions, thus creating the very instability from which it continues to suffer. Though I disagreed fundamentally with David about the Belfast Agreement, I do have to say this. David Trimble was more honest politically in his espousal, promotion and operation of the Belfast Agreement than those who supplanted him as the leader of unionism, who supplanted him by vilification of his agreement and vilification of the man to an extent which was often vicious and unnecessary. And having so vilified and destroyed those very same people and party, then donned the political clothes of David Trimble to operate to the full the very same agreement that they'd vilified throughout those years. So that is why I say David Trimble was more honest in his espousal of the Belfast Agreement than those who vilified him, or some of those who did. And of course that political dishonesty was compounded by the pretence that at St Andrews some radical change was made to the Belfast Agreement. Mr. Speaker, the only radical change was a change for the worse, whereby the First Minister comes now not from the biggest designation in this House, but from the biggest party. A move of short-termism and self-serving interest, primarily by the DUP, causing us now, even though unionism is still the biggest designation in this House, to be looking at the prospect of a Sinn Féin First Minister and the lead party of the biggest designation, the DUP, acting as their hapless bridesmaid. So yes, I disagreed with David Trimble very much about the Belfast Agreement, but I do recognise that he was the more honest one when it came to the espousal and promotion of that agreement. I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that in latter times I found particular common cause with Lord Trimble in opposing the protocol. And he was, of course, a joint applicant in the ongoing judicial review challenge to that protocol. And I am very grateful for, as unionism should be, for the intellectual dissection that David applied to the protocol, identifying and seeing that it not only presented peril to the constitutional position of Northern Ireland, but to the very institutions that he sought to create. And the message is clear, that there will come a choice for those who are adherents to the protocol. Do they want to cling to the protocol, or do they want to cling to the agreement that David Trimble formed? Because frankly, I don't believe you can have both. And I think David Trimble saw that when he said the very protocol was ripping the heart out of the agreement. And of course, I want to finish where I started, by expressing again and repeating our heartfelt sympathy for Lady Daphne and for the Trimble children. And Mr. Speaker, if I might, by an uncanny coincidence, another lecturer of mine in the law faculty died on the very same day. I refer to Gillian Kerr, the widow of the late Lord Brian Kerr, our former Lord Chief Justice, who served in the Supreme Court. And by that uncanny coincidence, Gillian Kerr also died on the 25th of July. I want to take the opportunity to express sympathy and condolences to the sons of Lord and Lady Kerr, who now in a very short space of time have lost both father and mother. And they too are those that made a mark of very particular significance in the history of this province. Thank you.
Thank you, and I call Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. For the most part, it has been moving